We'll get our clerk back where she belongs and everyone else, and we'll go ahead and start. We have agenda. This time, I'd like to call this meeting of the Graham County Board of Commissioners to order. And at this time, I'd ask Commissioner Williams to lead us in the invocation. I'd like to ask Billy Holder to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone stand, please.
Our gracious Lord, thank you for this beautiful day, Lord. We ask you to be with us, Lord. Do this meeting, Lord, that we do your will. Lord, be with the sick, our cancer victims in the county, Lord. That you touch them, Lord. We just thank you for everything, Lord, that you've done for us. In your holy name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, folks. At this time, we'd ask a motion for approval of the agenda. Before the entertainment of a motion, I'd like to ask everyone to please consider the change. We have Ms. Donna Howe with the Tribal EMS billing is here regarding bills, and we find that that is a closed session issue, and we request that we move item number 10 into closed session, item 13. Is that agreeable? We have to move that agenda item. And with that, I ask now we have a motion for the approval of the agenda as presented. Have a motion? We have a second. Any discussion or comment? All approved? 6-5-10. All opposed? Motion carries. This time, we ask for approval of the minutes for the workshop and regular meeting of April 22nd, Board of Equalization and Review minutes of April 26th, and the emergency meeting of May the 1st. We have a motion and a second. Any comment or question? All approved, signify with the hand. All opposed, motion carries. This time we'll recognize Ms. Rebecca Darling, and she'll be having discussion regarding the 2013-14 budget presentation. And with this, she'll be addressing the public. We will not have the regular finance report due to this presentation, and that will be done for the next meeting. Ms. Darling.
Okay, good evening. First of all, has everyone picked up a copy? Okay, that's why I have them up here. We're going to go through this in detail. Hopefully it will alleviate some questions. You got one? Anybody back there? I'm going to turn the first part of the comments over to our county manager, Greg Taylor, and then I'll be going through some numbers and some information.
During the budget process, as was discussed in the workshop meeting, we came a long way. And one of the first things we wanted to do this year was to basically write a letter and give an outline to the taxpayers of Graham County as to what was going on with the budget, what we were facing, and that way they had a good understanding of the tough decisions that were made. For those of you that got a copy of the budget that Ms. Garland just handed out, this is page 2 in that handout. And for those that did not, or for the record, I want to go through this page before Ms. Garland stands back up and is able to cover more in depth of what we worked on here. The letter states, to the taxpayers of Graham County Board of Commissioners wanted to provide this explanation of the tough decisions that were necessary to complete the 2013-14 budget. Looking back at recent years, our nation and country and county have experienced the effects of an economic slowdown. Our finances have taken a serious hit with the cost of living in this nation, and specifically in our county, as they continue to increase. While we are seeing signs of recovery, it's our obligation to be fiscally responsible for the health and welfare of the taxpayers of Graham County. Below is the list of the explanation of the budget process that we faced during these deliberations. Graham County operates on roughly a $13.5 million budget. Our current millage rate is 44 cents per 100. Beginning of the process, we started with a $700,000 shortfall. And the county, through where we ended up in the last day, was to propose to raise the millage rate by 2 cents, which amounts to $220,000, and as well as raise some local fees, exhausting all means in order to meet the shortfall. Many counties, and this is a side tangent, it's not in this. For Graham County, 1 cent on the mill rate is roughly $110,000. It's easily said that for counties around us, 1 cent on the mill rate, say for Jackson County, for instance, is over $1 million. So this is not a decision that we take lightly, but 1 cent on the mill rate for us is substantially less than for a lot of other areas around us. We have a smaller tax base, a smaller amount of taxable property. As well as with the increasing the millage rate by 2 cents, the Board of Commissioners have decided to go after all individuals and businesses that have not been paying their taxes. The county has tried debt set-off, garnishments, bank attachments, yet we still had $500,000 in unpaid taxes. The county will begin foreclosure process immediately, beginning with taxes that are the oldest. The county is striving to decrease the sanitation costs through a new recycling program. It's in the process of purchasing a transfer station. As we look down the road and looking at a budget from a planning tool, we realize that in the coming months and years, there's going to be a need for the purchase of the transfer station. That's going to come at a price, obviously. So we have to prepare ahead of time in order to have the money in place to handle the debt service on those types of facilities. As well as that, the county's building a new senior citizens center, mostly funded by grants, but in order for the center to draw down extra state funds, the county need to put county dollars into this building as well. The loss of revenue from the state and federal budget cuts are directly responsible for part of this shortfall. As you've heard many people here talk about before, PILT, or payment in lieu of taxes, which is money that we receive from the state and federal government for property that they own, roughly 74% of the county, is being reduced by 5.1%. Looking ahead again, the Affordable Health Care Act will have a large impact on county insurance costs. All of these factors put together are going to require us to plan ahead so that we're not caught in the coming years with a major shortfall that we're going to be unable to manage. As well as the other, from the federal government and the state and the cuts, we're seeing changes in our communities and mental health services, how the state is managing those services and the MCOs, the consolidation that we're seeing there. As with many are concerned, and we are seeing there are programs being cut for those in our community that are in need of mental health services. Whenever those programs are reduced or eliminated, the county winds up picking up where the state and those private entities which were funded by the state have left off. As well as in the county, as we mentioned before, the county operates on about 26% of taxable property. And we're continually coming up against the threat of conservation easements that are threatening the tax base, as well as PUV. We have a lot of timber property within the county and farm property. It's our job to make sure that the individuals who have property that are in PUV or in agriculture, or whatever it may be, are adhering to the land management plans so that it's fair and equitable across the county for those that do not have their property in those programs. Also, as county government, the health and welfare of our citizens is top on our priority. The need for new ambulances, equipment for ambulances, our emergency service, our law enforcement, we're continuing to need to upgrade our vehicles and equipment, which is going to be a recurring cost year after year. There's never a price on what it's going to take to provide for the health of our citizens in this county. And we know that You know, since I've been here over the last year, 2 ambulances that cost well over $100,000, any way you cut it. By the time you outfit them, and, you know, we're looking down the road and do heart rate monitors, which anyone that's ever had a heart attack is going to appreciate that one of those are on those ambulances, $35,000 a piece. This type of equipment are things that we need. In closing, we want to appreciate all the taxpayers of Graham County for entrusting us to manage your tax dollars in the best and most responsible way. God has truly blessed us with family, friends, and neighbors that make Graham County the best place to call home. And we want to thank you and God bless. And I'll turn it over to Rebecca.
Okay, so what I want to do is go through some of the numbers with you, just so you can get a feel of where we are as a county. Mr. Cable has outlined many of the things that have become new challenges for our county. And what I wanted to do is give you kind of a breakdown of where the shortfall came. The best we can do, and when I say the best, no government is 100% efficient. We all recognize that. And what we have committed to do, I think, over the last 4.5 years is to become as efficient as possible. And we did a whole lot. If you were sitting in the gallery about 4 years ago, you heard a lot about that the county had overexpanded its budget quite a bit for several years. And so we've been having to play catch up. And if you were here about a year ago, you heard a whole lot about fund balance and what the state requires. And just to give you a real quick overview of what the state requires us to do is they are only happy with us if we have at a minimum 8% of our total budgeted expenditures and fund balance. I'm not saying they're happy, they're only satisfied. That's the minimum requirement. And so what they're happy with is if the county is sitting with about 28% of its budgeted expenditures and fund balance. And that is a state mandate. So what we've been doing the last 4 years is to try to build our fund balance back up. We were, about 4 years ago, we were about $1 million in fund balance. We're probably going to close the year out with about $4.5 million in fund balance. We'll probably still be below the 28% required, or I should say, recommended. We're sitting at 22, or we're at the last audit. So if we dip much below that, your finance officer's going to get a ding and get a smack on the wrist by the state government. So that's just to kind of catch you up to where we've been. And as Mr. Cable outlined, we've been hit with several things on the revenue side that when we went to propose and project our revenues, we were really scratching our heads because we were like, oh dear, we're sitting with probably about $650,000 to $700,000 in revenue that we're projecting that we're not going to have, that we broke the budget this time last year. Part of that, you've heard a lot the last hour or so about unfunded mandates. If you want to turn to page 3 in this package, you'll see I've done an analysis of where was the shortfall coming from. Part of that, about $101,000, was unfunded mandates, and as the board was outlining in the workshop, about $66,000 of that is what we're projecting will be the cost of the Affordable Care Act for this coming year, and then about $35,000 is the unemployment surtax. So, Mr. Doug, what we were talking about, that's coming from the state, and the ACA is coming from the federal government. They're saying the state side, I mean, we've all heard about the Affordable Care Act, so we're not going to beat it to death, but the state said, we've borrowed too much from the federal government. Now the federal government is pushing on us to pay this shortfall back. So every business owner, every employer in North Carolina is going to be automatically assessed with a 1% surtax on the first $20,900 and every employee's wage. Now, at first glimmer, from a county perspective, we were thinking, well, maybe we won't get hit, because when we have someone who's drawing unemployment in our county, we do a pay-as-you-go. So somebody makes a claim and they draw the unemployment, then it used to be that we would pay back 120% of whatever they drew in the following year. Okay, that's going to be about $98,000 this year. I've already gotten that from the state, but then they say, and we used to pay that on an annual basis, usually about January. Then they said that, no, you're not exempt either. So, you know, the government giveth and they taketh away. They said, you don't have to pay 120% anymore, you just pay 100%, however, you will be subject to the surtax. So the cost of paying that, and that'll be paid forward, will be right around $35,000. So it's about $209 for every employee that we have that makes at least $20,900. So part of our shortfall is just strictly the fact that we're having to pay out things that we were not having to pay out before. And stop me if you've got questions, okay? Because I love questions. The second part is that our assessed value as a county declined this year. And part of the reason for that was that we've had several large tracts of land that have gone into either a present use value or conservation easement. Now, the present use value has been around for a long, long time. But the conservation easements are a new thing, and probably our tax assessor could speak a whole lot more clearly about that. But basically, that removes those parcels of land from our tax base. And then, you know, we just have several other things that are mandated by the state, which creates a drain on our tax base. So when we got to crunching the numbers, we realized that we're going to be losing about $300,000 in just tax revenue. So instead of your budget showing about $5 million in new taxes, it's going to be $300,000 less than that. And just looking overall at what we need to do as a county to keep everyone safe, we got with the sheriff's department and they're needing some additional staffing, so that accounted for about $115,000. And then as Mr. Cable mentioned, you know, in order to keep our law enforcement vehicles up to date, and if you'll recall, if you've been sitting here for a while, we've kind of pushed these things off when we didn't have any, when we were just trying to survive. As he mentioned, we had to buy 2 ambulances this year because the ones we had were going down too frequently. And I don't think any of us would want ourselves or our loved ones sitting on the side of the road if we're having an MI or a stroke or what have you. So and what we're trying to do is not just fund backwards, but fund forward, because we know that about every third year, we have 3 ambulances. About every third year, those ambulances need to be rolled off and a new one brought online. So to be more effective in how we're doing our work, we could kind of weigh out. I think Mr. Henry can help me a little bit if I'm wrong, but once an ambulance gets above 100,000 miles, then you're looking at a lot of maintenance costs, and there again we're looking at things, an ambulance going down. So my number that I came up with my shortfall was about $651,000. So what's the board going to do about it? Well, first of all, the first decision the board made was they heard what several of you have mentioned more than once. The question was brought up a few board meetings ago. The question was, what are you going to do about the uncollected taxes? We have $500,000 in uncollected taxes. What are you going to do about it? And of course, we have been doing garnishment, debt set off, and attachments, bank attachments, but we knew that we needed to do something more. And so this board committed this was their first decision in this process, that they would go after and begin the foreclosure process. And while it seems harsh, it is just part of what has to happen. If you don't make your mortgage payment with the bank, and you go 3 or 4 months, you're gonna get a foreclosure notice. And I can go back, I'm not old enough, but my parents are old enough to remember when they used to see foreclosures happening on the courthouse steps. We're hoping that we don't have to go to that length, but we, the board and myself and Mr. Cable and the clerk, we've all committed that notices will be going out very, very soon, as quickly as we can get them generated, to those who have ignored every other means and who have still not responded, that their property will be subject to foreclosure. That will close what they're committing to, and we're hoping that we get more than that, but what we feel like that we can get. We ran the as Mr. Holder mentioned last meeting in the workshop, there's some that are $30 or $40 that it's kind of not worth the legal fees, but what they've done is run a list, and we feel like that we could begin and start collecting at least $300,000 in back property taxes. We also dug in the process, and we looked at fees, and while we don't want to always have to pass fees along to the taxpayer, we felt like that there were some fees in some areas that had not been adjusted in years and years and years. And then also in the process, we got some good news. The health department receives what they call a Medicaid cost settlement every summer, and in the process, we actually received the news that we would probably be getting about $35,000 more in a Medicaid cost settlement than we had projected. So we feel like we'll get another $76,000 in additional revenue from fees and from the Medicaid cost settlement. And then myself as a finance officer, I had to kind of put what I felt like my agenda to the side about fund balance just a little bit. I don't like getting unit letters from the local government commission. That's when they smack me on the wrist. But I told the board that if we still had any more shortfall, because I didn't feel good that they would need to go up another half penny on the dollar, I said that I will hopefully be able, if we can't generate additional revenue, that I'll pull forward some fund balance. I'm hoping and praying that we have a surplus this year, and if you've been here, you'll know that you know we've gone into April with a pretty good surplus. I will tell you this: April and May and June are always a bloodbath on the surplus. But I'm hoping that we'll have enough surplus going in that it'll satisfy local government commission to the level that I won't get dinged too bad. Yeah, I know I'm talking a lot. Please stop me if you've got questions. What I tried to do too was, if you'll turn to the next page, is I put everything on a bar graph, because what I did is I took and I said, we have a $13.4 million budget. Where's the money going to come from? And just to give you an idea, about 41% of the budget comes from tax dollars, property tax dollars. Another 48% comes from shared revenues. That's federal and state dollars. That would be sales tax revenue. You hear me talking about a lot about the sales tax revenue. We also get money from the federal government to help fund DSS. We get federal and state dollars as well to fund DSS. And we'll tell you this, the county contribution for DSS actually this year projected will be $50,000 less than what we projected. So even though sequestration is hitting us hard in a lot of areas like our PILT, at least for this coming year, it's not going to hit us quite so hard. And then we get a lot of federal and state dollars to fund the health department. So a lot of our budget, while it says it's $13.4 million, a big chunk of that is money that flows through the county. It's not actually our property tax dollars, but I wanted to give you that first. And then I've got a pie graph here for you. And basically, $5.5 million in our revenue stream is gonna come from current year taxes plus the back taxes, the DMV taxes and the back real property taxes. So I said, well, okay, so how much of that 46 cents, what percentage is gonna go to what parts of the county? And if you look, if you combine law enforcement, which is 31%, ambulance, which is 12%, basically 43%, I can't add, 43% is going to public safety. 11% of our budget is going to go to sanitation. 16%, this is the county contribution. 16% of your tax dollar goes to your health and human services, which is your DSS services and your health department. Plus, part of it is like transit, your senior center, those areas where we actually have hands-on work with the taxpayers and helping with their health and welfare. 15% goes to public education, and part of that is the debt service that we pay on the school bond and the QZAB bond. 6% goes to cultural and recreation, which includes your library and your rec activities. 2% goes to the Tri-County Community College, and then the rest is things like our economic development, allocations we make to some of our nonprofit agencies, and just to float the general government, okay? This is your property tax dollar, broken down into percentages. And if you want to flip the page and just see the dollar amounts, you can see what part of our budget is having to be covered by that 46%. And I've got it broken down into the actual cents on the mill rate for you. So you can see how much of your tax dollar is going where. And that's the property tax dollar, because part of what's floating our boat is about $1 million in sales tax revenue we get in. And then, as I said, a big, part of your, while the county has to contribute by statute to DSS and the health department, we try to cover those expenditures before we ask you for any extra tax dollars. Does anybody have any questions? Did I leave anything out? We're really, we weren't happy when we got into the budget process and saw how it gets pushed down to the county, that there's decisions made in Raleigh and in Washington that translates to us. And unfortunately, that's when our forefathers set us up as a democratic republic, they set us up for what we call the concept of federalism. And federalism's good when the money's flowing, but it can really hurt when decisions are made in other areas. Any questions? Okay, I do have, if you would like, I will have available in the office. I have a few copies here as well. If you'd like to look at the line item budget, line by line, I'm happy to provide it. I did not make 50 copies of it just in the interest of saving money and saving paper, but it's about a 54-page document here. I have several extra copies over here if you'd like to look at the line items as well. Any questions?
Becky, I would like to ask you, if you would please, to explain revenue neutral.
Revenue neutral is when you take the tax base of your county and you look at what is required, because when you do a budget, you always look at every source of revenue you could come up with, and then you look at your tax base last. Or that's the way I do it. And revenue neutral is basically what is the tax rate that will carry the budget without creating any surplus in the budget. So actually, when we did the calculation this year, when we said, well, what would revenue neutral be to make it work? It was like 46.7 cents. And that's one reason that I committed to the board. I said, I don't want to have to put any more burden on the taxpayer than I have to. So technically, this budget will be basically 1 cent below revenue neutral when we look at the tax base. And the reason that we did that, the reason we have it that way is because if I don't get enough other revenues, I'll be pulling a little from fund balance. And I'll be dealing with the local government commission. But I think they can see how committed we all are to making it work, and they also understand what other burdens that taxpayers are having to carry. So I don't think I'll get dinged too bad. If I do, you guys.
Does that mean that the property owner will pay almost the same taxes under this, or really it'll just a slight bit less?
Then last
Yeah,
year.
yeah, if this is 1 cent under revenue neutral, right?
Theoretically, but when you actually sit down and
I know
look
that's
at
it, on the
it,
average.
you're gonna pay a little bit more. But on the average, it would, but it's not gonna, when you look at your tax bill, it'll be I would not expect it to be
Be
the
almost the
same.
same.
Yeah, it'll be at just a few dollars.
Did I answer your question?
Does that make sense?
All right. Any more questions or comments for Ms. Garland?
One thing too, we did commit that we heard what has been expressed several times from the general audience, that we needed to have a systematic pay plan put in place, and we're 98% there on the report. And within that pay plan, we did see some inequities where some folks were not making what I call a living wage. So what we try to do is cure a few of those inequities. We did not give a pay raise across the board. We just tried to look at specific situations where perhaps someone may have come in at a very low rate, and based on their experience and their number of years with the county and credentialing, and also just what is a living wage for someone to be able to go to the grocery store and make it. We tried to cure those inequities, and that amounted to about $43,000 in the budget. But I didn't want to say that, but we felt that was something that needed to be cured and fixed going forward, so that our pay plan is correct, and that people are making an equitable wage for what their training is and what their level is. So that is one area we tried to fix this year. But there was no across the board pay raises for any county, for all the rest of the county employees.
Do the reevaluation, that's gonna affect the whole thing though, right? Because, our region, the prices have dropped.
Yes.
So, we're gonna try to go with 2% now, and then when is the reevaluation?
It will take effect January 1 of 15.
So then we'll probably have to come back and ask for something there,
But once again, what you'll do is if property values drop overall, you may have to raise the tax rate, but there again, that's where that revenue neutral is very important, is that you try to maintain, that you don't give anybody a hit on their taxes, that you just try to get the valuations more in line with reality. And, we got hit there because the reval occurred and then the bottom fell out. So we got a lot of people with property that's valued in the tax scroll is a lot higher than what they could get in the market. So this will hopefully get it to a leveled out place. And while the mill rate may go up, what we'll strive to do is keep it at that revenue neutral rate where nobody really sees a big impact or even any impact, hopefully, on their overall tax bill. What I wanna try to do is if my tax bill is $400, I wanna keep it at $400. But we're hoping that with the reval process, that we'll be able to say that everybody's property is valued at what it's really worth in the market today, and that it doesn't ding you either way if you're trying to get a loan or what have you. Okay?
Did any department or segment of the system, of the government, get an across-the-board increase?
Just in general, as far as their total budget,
Yeah, one department, say EMS or
Mhm.
police, did anybody get an across-the-board raise?
wage increase.
Right.
They did do, an increase to our telecommunicators, those that are actually doing the dispatch, they were one department. Then they were just scattered kind of across the county as far as the departments went. But in looking at what our telecommunicators made as far as, not so much the supervisory level, but those that were underneath the supervisory level, it did appear that they were lower than they needed to be for the level of responsibility and stress that they carried. The other inequities were basically, like I was saying, just scattered across the departments. And I think that was more of a function of when they were hired. And there had never, for several years had not been a real close look at what everybody was making and how does it align with the pay grades that, what we try to do is kind of work off we kind of did a hybrid approach. We kind of looked at the pay grades as the state assigns them with the Office of State Personnel. And then we looked at some of the other counties in our area, and we tried to base the grading on what other counties in the Office of State Personnel. We have to do that for DSS and the Health Department every year anyway. But what we tried to do was look at what other counties close to us were doing as far as the grading went. Obviously, because we don't have a tax base, we couldn't always meet what other counties are doing. But we tried to be as systematic as we could and then ferret out those inequities as we went down the list. And I'll tell you, we're human. We probably missed somebody. I hope we didn't. But we're human and we probably missed somebody. And hopefully we can fix that going forward as well. Any other questions?
If not, thank you, Ms. Garland. And I just want to say a few things to this. Talking about the PUVs, the present use value, which causes there to be a reduced amount of taxation on property. If I have my memory correct, we have 300 in Graham County. That's why I feel that there's a need for us to go and have audits and review these, both based on plans for harvest of whatever particular crops they may have, forestry, anything such as that, so we can find out which legitimate PUVs are on. It further complicates the matter with PUVs is that there's legislation in the General Assembly right now that has been put out there that wants to go and have PUVs without a plan. That means anybody walks in the door and they go and fill out the paperwork, they're going to be awarded a PUV. So go and take that, it further compounds the problem. And speaking about how we come up with a number of $300,000 as a line item in our budget for going and getting those taxes that have not been paid, I'd like to make reference to the March 27, 2013 copy of the Graham Star. First step required in that of a foreclosure process is that of the advertising. I'd like for you to be reminded that appeared in the Graham Star on March 27, 2013. We have yet to finalize the process here in Graham County about doing that. But I think the thing to do is to look at those who have got the most money that they owe and those who have received the most tax bills and have just ignored them. So we've come up with the top 150, and I'm not going to go through those names or anything, but the total for those top 150 comes to the amount of $339,696.68. So I guess that will be the bid for the top 150. And then the comment's gonna be, well, you're going after them, and why aren't you going after those small ones? You know, the way it will work is, we'll go out through this in a methodical way. We're gonna have that established, and to go and get those revenues that are owed to the folks of Graham County. So, I've heard a lot tonight about, well, this government. But we need to understand that services cost, and the taxpayers of the county are paying it. And we're in a position of stewardship for it. And I appreciate those that have brought that to our attention. And I, again, that's in March 27, 2013 edition of the Graham Star, the public notice was sent out. So with that, I thank you very much, and the whole thing of the conservation issues and the things of sequester, those were all unforeseen things, and it's not over yet. So we'll have to adjust as we go along. Thank you, Ms. Garland. This time I'd like to recognize Mr. David Dotson regarding the recycling grant.
Going after the budget with good news is always a good thing. I wanted to give you an update on the recycling. I had originally intended to make a check presentation tonight. Unfortunately, the person that needs to sign the check was gone. So we will do that next week. We'll probably just bring it up to the office and make the presentation direct, if that's okay. We'll talk about that in just a minute. I wanted to let you know that we are now fully deployed on our recycling program. We have Robbinsville, town of Santila, Lake Santila, the town of Fontana Dam, the school system. 3 county locations are now all open. We're closing in on 20 tons of recyclable material. One of the challenges that we've kind of figured out in all this is that the recyclable material is very light. And as a result, we're getting about 4 tons of load in a relatively small trailer. I guess it's a 38-foot trailer, I believe. So one of the challenges we have going forward is trying to figure out a way to get more load, more into a truck, so that we can get it and not have the gas expense. But that being said, we're still saving $23 in expense money going down to Georgia and gaining $23 a ton in recyclable revenue. And on top of that, we're probably a little bit of a gas savings in Asheville and of course, Georgia. And on top of that, we're getting more cardboard than we expected, which Donnie has been able to set up separately and can be baled. We get quite a bit more money for it than we would for the normal recycling. So all in all, things are going well. You should have noticed an ad in the paper hopefully this week, or last week I guess it was, a full-page ad. And just to let everybody know here, that was not paid by the taxpayers. That was paid by the great organization through sponsorships that we sold. We ended up with close to $11,500 to help pay for the matching funds that the county and the towns would have to match. So basically, we got all of the infrastructure free from the state through the grant program, and the matching funds are being covered by the great organization and those sponsors. And so infrastructure-wise, the cost hasn't been anything to the county. However, there are other expenses, of course. There's the personnel expense and some of those other things. So we're not at break even yet, but we're working towards that goal. We've also got the county a new grant for $24,000, is that right? Which will allow them to build a separate recycling transfer station so that it will not take up the floor of the existing transfer station during work hours during the week. And that'll be a big, big help for Donnie. So that he doesn't have to clean off the floor and handle recyclables. So that's good news. There is a matching component to that as well. I'm hopeful that the great organization will continue to work at sponsorships. And hopefully we'll be able to cover that next year when it's time to actually pay those bills. I want to take just a minute to thank the people that have been involved with this program. I want to especially thank the commissioners for allowing this to go forward. It's been about 2.5 years in the making, and it's really gratifying to see that it's happened. I want you to know that we're getting lots of positive feedback from folks, and hopefully you're hearing some stuff too, that people are pleased that we're doing this. I also want to give thanks to Greg and Becky for persevering and being patient with me. I tend to be a little impatient sometimes and push a little hard, but they haven't got off my head yet, so I guess I'm doing okay there. and especially Donnie Orr. Donnie Orr has, poor guy, I mean, we really made extra work for Donnie, and he has sucked it up and really come through for us. So I want to thank Donnie for his effort as well. So bottom line is that we will be making a check presentation for $6,000. That covers the ads that are running, and we'll also, everybody should be getting a brochure in the mail this week at the Postal Service about the recycling program, and that is also covered in the $6,000. So just want to let everybody know what was going on.
Great, thank you, Mr. Thomas. Appreciate all your efforts with that. Having said that, I know that Commissioner Holder and myself both serve on the sanitation committee, recycling/sanitation, and we've still got some issues that we need to address, and those have been discussed. So with those recommendations coming from that board, we're going to have to take a close survey about how we're doing with collections, the cost of collections, the sites that need to be opened, those need to be closed, and that's still something in deliberation, and we want to have as much input as we possibly can. The last time that we had anything dealing with this was Bear Creek, and thought we'll just close Bear Creek because it's a dumping site for the folks in Cherokee County. With that, the failure on my part, and in making any decision on that was the demographics and the distances that are involved. Hopefully, we're going to try and bring that to the committee with that type of information about the densities and where things need to be. So hopefully, this is not over yet. About trying to bring down the issue of the amount. You can look at the pie chart and see how much we're spending on garbage disposal and compare it to some of the other programs in the county. Thank you very much. This time we'd like to recognize Mr. Zeeland McKinney for a comedy show for tax appeal. Mr. McKinney, welcome.
Good afternoon. I represent Conley and Carolyn Show. They have appealed their tax assessment, as I'm sure aware of. I have presented an appraisal performed by Brian Foley on that property to Mrs. Orr. What I would like to do is to have Mr. Foley simply explain to you the methodology he used to perform his appraisal and why the appraisal performed by Mrs. Orr is not indicative of the true value of the property. I'll try to make it as brief as I can. Essentially, what I was asked to do in the scope of work was to provide an opinion of market value of the property located on Chiolra Trail at Santita, which I did, and I have an effective date. I believe it was December of 2012. The methodology in that is to look at recent sales of properties as close and as proximate as possible. Anybody that's dealt with that issue here in Graham County, you realize I'm not always able to stay in bounds, but I was able to find 2 sales here in Graham County. I included 9, everywhere from Bryson City at Fontana to Chateau and Lake Nantahala. These homes were all lakeview, they're not lakefront. And in that process, I've been informed that it's not a valid appraisal by Ms. Orr because they were looking for a 2010 value. In my personal opinion, I could go back and adjust that 2 years. It would not be a significant difference by applying a factor. The real estate collapse began in 2006 or 7, gained a lot of momentum in 08. And when I say collapse, I'm talking about the sheer reduction in the number of sales. Values began to tank in 8 and 9. So it's not like from 2010 to 2012, values saw all of that precipitous drop in that time period. We experienced a lot of those prior to that. But some of the inconsistencies that we came across, in my appraised value, she has current tax value on that at 50% completion is $604,870. $270,000 lot, which is Lakeview, and I grant you, it is a good Lakeview lot, but it is not lakefront. And that's at the home being 50% complete. So when this thing's done, they will have 1,877 square feet heated area, and it'll have a tax value of $939,740. I looked at that in several different ways. I've got two tax cards. I've got one from September of 2012, where it has a heated area of 6,953 square feet. And when finished, it would have a tax value of $1,066,780. So we're going to drop 5,076 square feet of heated area, yet we only dropped in the ballpark of $126,000. That's about $12.50 a square foot. It's not realistic. But if you have any questions for me, I mean, I don't know what else you need from me.
I do have a question, and I'm trying to understand this from the standpoint of being partially completed.
Right.
So this means that there was a certificate of completion given to this property, and there was that they could move in?
Not at this point, no, sir. This house is,
They're not living there?
No.
They're not using the facility?
they are,
Is there power hooked to the house?
there is power.
How is that?
I'm assuming it's through a temporary part.
For how many years?
She has the house as being scheduled for 2011.
Okay. And the permits to do this work, is it an owner construction?
And
or
that,
is it-
I
or
was
is
assuming
it-
he's
is
doing it
it-
on his own.
Is it out? Are those permits still valid?
That I can't agree. I did the appraisal as completed, based on.
Well, I'm just trying to understand, I mean, I see this and it says 7116, what's going to be proposed once it's finished. And I understand the issue of it being, having so much of it already being heated, and that would be a number that would be used in coming up with a number. Is that right for the evaluation?
The way the tax card reads, the heated area, the 1877 would be what it is when it's 100% finished. As they are planning on finishing it, which is the main floor and a turret area.
So they're living in the house with a temporary,
They do not live there, they live in Tennessee.
If I could say this, I think there were two different attempts to appraise it by Zor. The first attempt was in September of last year, the second was in March of this year. What Mr. Farley's saying is, in September of last year, she showed there was 6,953 feet of heated area, and she appraised it at $668,309. On March the 7th of this year, she said there was 1,877 square feet of heated space, and her appraisal was still $604,870. She used a multiplier, a quality multiplier, in September of 129, which is fairly low. But her multiplier in March of this year was 218, and it's the same structure. I mean, I don't know how you all of a sudden increase your quality. It's 50% complete both times. I don't know how you increase the quality multiplier when nothing has changed about the house. In addition to that, in September, the appraisal that she did, she used a multiplier of 1, saying it was average quality. According to Mr. Farley, in March of this year, it's all of a sudden become a custom home, and there's a 1.45 multiplier. The building's not changed. What she's done on paper's changed. The building hasn't changed. It's a sheetrock house. I've seen photographs of it. There's nothing custom or special about the house other than the shape of it.
There's construction people, any say it comes to station week, 2 weeks at a time, works on it. And I know it's probably farther along than
Mr. Evers, if you extrapolate the numbers out, she has the house half finished, and she has the heated area at $322.25 a square foot. I submit to you, you would be hard put to get $322 a square foot for any house in Graham County when it's completed, much less half. I mean, it's ridiculous.
How does the person represent, what do they want?
Excuse me?
What do they want?
Well, we think Mr. Farley's appraisal, his appraisal is 97% complete, and we think it represents the true value of the property in money.
Well, what I do, my appraisal is proposed, is as it's proposed and as completed. That appraisal is $520,000. Once it's completed, for her purposes, it's going to go on the books for $939,740. I'm looking at a $400 difference between market value and assessed value. They're
$400,000.
Yeah, 400. What did I say?
He said 400.
Yeah, 400. Yeah, $400,000. I'm sorry. My client, Mr. Zeal, is asking that you take a look at my data and
What was your appraisal?
$520,000. But I know she's going to explain it. There's a few things that I look through the tax card of the homes that are along that ridge line up there. Quality on one of them is 170, and these adjustments have come through a series of adjustments that she has for size, complexity, for custom of it. There's a lot of things factor in that. You're looking at the home 6 months apart, yet if you're going from 129 to 218, look at some inconsistency there. That's why they call them. If you look at from one end to the other on that ridge up there, that quality and base rate goes 178 to the subject of 218, to another one at 139, one at 157. Favors my subject. That's a recent one, 2011. That's my subject. That one's on at 133. Ours is on at 218.
This house has vinyl siding.
It's vinyl siding. Without a question, it's got some complex design and shape vision. I don't deny that. I'm just looking at the consistency between.
What percent of completion did you find the house?
At this point, it's probably greater than 50%.
Like how much?
From what they're going to live in, the upper level and the tour, the main level and the tour, you're probably at 75% on those areas.
And is this appraisal include the property value,
Excuse me?
the house and the
Absolutely, yeah. I looked at
Your appraisal's the house and the land.
the house and the land, absolutely. Now, and be fair with Miss Irma back here, I'm not under the same constraints as she is. She's constrained, according to her, that she has to be, everything she uses has to be within the county. I look at the typical market areas. The man coming in from Florida will look at Santiva a lot of times. They'll look at Nantahala or they'll look at Fontana. So I can go a little bit further in market area. And she's based her land value, and they're fairly consistent up there at 270. There was one sale in 2009 at 275. Everything prior to that was substantially lower than that. I would contend that then and now, one sale doesn't make a market, but in this situation,
In
apparently.
fact, it was a waterfront lot, I believe, Mr. Farley, was sold up in that area for how much?
What did we get him for?
$100,000 in 2001.
If it was a lakefront lot that sold up there for what?
190.
190, and this is lakefront. This is not lakefront.
I'm gonna drag you look at it. I've seen it when they put the first backhoe in there. And I don't see how they got such a place in, you know. This is all
And in December 1998, it sold for $350,000.
That 350, if you look at that, that goes back to John McCracken. That's when he bought every remaining piece of property in Thunderbird. And that was probably in the ballpark of what eventually became about 25 or 30 different lots. That entire ridge top through there, he got for 350,000, plus lakefront and plus quite a number of mid-level lots. And it's
So
John.
you're saying that it's not the same 0.84 acres?
Oh, no,
Absolutely not.
it's
He
the
got
whole area.
He
Why
bought
is,
it for
why
50.
is it reported, what's the 100,000 for?
That's where Mr. Collins purchased that lot.
And how much was it? How many acres was it?
To .84. So the 350 probably included, and like I say, I know he works down there, it was probably 15 acres that Mr. McCracken
No, I'm
bought.
not familiar with that at all, but okay, that's an explanation. All right. You're defeated.
I've got top news for four houses in a row. That, what is one next to it?
I think Iceland's got the vacant lot, is it,
What's Bob's?
let's see,
It's the one right next to it.
63, 62 is Holbrook, 64 is Crabtree,
Yeah.
is the one next to it.
What's the price?
It's appraised at 686,600, has a quality rating of 139, has 3,002 square foot of heated area, for the subject has 1877. So about half. The lots are fairly consistent with the homes. It's the improvement values which have been adjusted from. In September, we have a long square footage to play with. In March, we don't have as much finished. So in order to keep that value about the same, quality adjustments and size adjustment were increased and the value stayed fairly consistent with a lot less square footage.
All right, I'm having some confusion about the dates and everything on it. So your appraisal was done December 7th, 2012.
Right.
This is the document we have here. And then the reeval date was in 2010.
When was the eval? If we're on an 8-year cycle in 2007,
Well, it was in 10.
And
I mean, it was 8 years before reeval was done. That's what caused a lot of this. And that's why we're going with a 4-year cycle instead of 8.
And Mr. Edwards, what he said is that there's not going to be any significant change in his opinion from 2010 to now. I mean, the crash, I dated from August of 2008. That's when we really started feeling the crunch around here. That's when everything just pretty much collapsed. It went down for about 12, 24 months after that, and it kind of stabilized. So,
Let me ask you a question. These houses, there's 2 or 3 that went through foreclosure. When they did that, the banks have to pay the tax on them. They get that.
in some instances, they would, in other instances, the homeowners would have to pay. In some instances, the banks would, in order to clear the title, somebody's going to have to pay taxes.
Yeah.
Well,
I wonder who that is.
Those reasons foreclosed on.
They should be paid at foreclosure.
Yeah. That's right.
And if it's a short sale situation, it's mandatory that they be paid. And that's, there's been, I guess there's been as many short sales as been foreclosure, probably a whole lot of them.
I would say that even when times were good, the sales along that ridge top, the highest one that we ever had was 615,000, and that was Mr. Sawicki's down at the end. And then there's been a couple of 400,000s of another place. We're looking at this house at 1,800 square foot when it's finished, being on for nearly $1 million.
is the first and the other. Probably the worst one, well, on the other side of it, it's probably not worse, but the least.
It's comparable, though. I mean, it's good quality. I've been in the house when it's sold. And then obviously, there are the 2 or 3 that are just great on top up there. That's next to this, where this one's going to be at or above them and that. And I'll tell you, I'm glad the folks on here this, because I would not want to offend them. It's not, they've had a lot of problems with this house. It's vinyl sided. It's all sheet rock inside. We don't have a lot of tongue and groove. I'm sure they'll have some hardwood and ceramic tile, but it is not of the caliber that most of those homes that are being built in there is. Other than design, it's complex in design.
It wouldn't be expensive to build if it wasn't for all the concrete that they put in.
But I'll say this too, cost does not equal value, and I get in trouble for that a lot, but that's the number one valuation issue. I can spend $10 million on a house, and I might not be able to sell it for $100,000. That's the reality.
I mean, if the market doesn't pick up, I'm afraid a lot of those people who overbuilt foundations on the lake will be finding that too.
Yeah, right, if they have already.
Well, you gentlemen realize that we are the NR, and, you know, we'll hash this out and get a response to you on it. So this is the Irma and see about this. It's always difficult. We're going through the reeval now, and I hope that, this is one thing, I'll just say it, is that we as a board have a better understanding of schedule values, and we've talked it over with our tax folks, and everybody's working hand in hand to do that. So we'll hear both sides of it. It's not easy, but we'll look to it and see that. All right, thank you very much. Okay, Mike's got it for Ms. Irma Phillips, our tax assessor. This will have to do with the previous comments on the common shed property, and also Mr. James Accord. Accord, okay.
The reason is the difference of the square footage that.
People might be a little bit on right here, but then.
The difference in the square footage of that house from last fall to this spring was the heated square feet. When we went out there to the house, of course, it was just the shell part where we put 50%, but it has three levels. So we put all of those as finished when it was going to be completed.
Okay.
Well, when Ms. Conley called in March, she said no, that it was just going to be the first floor. First floor was just going to be completed. The rest of them, they didn't have the money to complete. So that's when I made the recalculation of the heated square feet. And as far,
Ms. Show,
pardon?
Ms. Show,
Here.
Yes. And as far as the schedule of values as of 2010, all of the Lakeview properties on top, all of them went on to $270,000. Mr. Farley in his appraisal put that lot at $120,000. I cannot touch that until the next revow.
You see, that's an issue. It seems to be a non-issue. And let me ask another question, you know, and dealing with this too, about sales, how far back, 2010?
Oh, just 2008, 9 is always new.
Not back to 2006.
No. And see, the
See, I
sale,
sat here and knew some of that, but I need to understand it.
the sale that really put it over the top was in September of 2009, and that's when that lot sold for $275,000 up there.
that lot or no?
It was another one.
One on
But they all have the same view on that side.
the one on the end, the first one when you turn out the road, right? It's a light bill.
shape design is that's why it is extremely irregular on that property, that house. And that's why it does have a 7, and then the custom is 5. Because of the quality of the material.
Is it permissible for you to ask an open if their permit's pulled for this work?
Yeah.
During open?
Permits are active as of right now. We've granted temporary power to, basically we do that to activate the floor and the rest things, and they can do that to finish it. They were going to finish this whole house, 3 floors, and I think it totaled one near 6,000. We have permits for all of them, but they decided they only want to complete the top floor. But the exterior of the building, all 3 floors are complete. The exterior. So the only thing they're not finishing is the interior of the bottom 2 floors. So there's also an elevator in there. They canceled the elevator. There are a lot of things that we have from original permits. You know, and we can't keep the permit up forever. If they want to finish the top floor, we're gonna have to split that off. Because of their finance, they told me they had to cut back to just 1 floor. But if that house was completed, it would be close to, what was it?
It's 7,100 square feet.
Yeah, it's a big house.
That's why the shape design 7 and the quality is 5. We do, when I changed it, I put it to the 2 lower levels, I put to an unfinished basement, 2,798 square feet. That's parts of the house that they're not even gonna use.
An independent appraiser just here said that it's 75% complete. Is that the first
That's
floor?
not right.
The first floor?
The first
The
floor.
second floor? Third floor?
No, I'm thinking,
Combined?
I'm thinking he meant the first floor.
Just the first floor.
He did it something else. Because the house is not 75% complete. I got 2 floors that are not even worked on inside yet. Because they don't want to do it right now. They are short, like I said, and they just want to do that top floor.
I can understand that. Yeah, but you know, when it comes to what I'm wanting to understand is how to come up with $520,000 then. I mean, that's something that I would have to mull and put together because, you know, it's basically a house sitting there with 1 floor with 1,800 and something square feet in it. Is that an assumption?
Yes.
Livable space. What would an unfinished basement?
Well, it's got sheet rock.
No, I didn't do any electrical or plumbing or anything like that.
On the lower level.
Yeah.
But the first level,
First level, yeah, I mean, I give them temporary power, they're headed for completion.
no, the level.
But they don't, there's nothing to be done.
I thought it was sheet rock.
I don't think there was any electrical or plumbing in any of that.
Well, we get all this in one lot, because, you know, I hear what they're saying, and I looked at this, and they say, well, when it is complete, it would appraise out at $939,000. And then I hear now that it's appraised out in the shape that it's in at $520,000. And then, you know, the computation of $325 square foot, is that what I assume they said to me? Is that the number?
218.
218, but they said, you know, where did the 325?
They based that 325 off the 1,800 square feet that they're completing. Even though the structure is substantially larger than that, they adjusted their numbers in the valuation of what the Serma had to that.
David, when they originally started this house, did the plan show this would be livable quarters when it was completed?
Yes, sir. It had elevator, 3/4 complete, 3, I don't know what he calls them, but castle designs. 3 turrets or whatever you call it, there's 3 floors of those. And it was pulled as a completed structure. But, you know, they ended up putting a whole lot of money in the foundation. Because they went with 4 walls. And it cost a lot more than they thought.
And they purchased permits based on the completed, yes, square footage. Yes.
The biggest difference, well, one of the differences is the lot price, and that's $150,000 difference right there.
Right.
And I can't touch that until about 2015. But as far as taking it off as custom, when we went there in March, I think the board needs to see it.
I'm gonna have to ask more time.
It's not, was started till it's, where it's at right now.
Pardon?
I said, I've seen from the time it was started, when it just, like that, so they got it.
Y'all ready to make a decision?
They go finish. As they started, they did, just finish one floor. It's not like problem, so they didn't finish it.
But you have to, you see, that's the problem with this idea of it being somehow really partially completed. You know, that's the wrench right there. That's a good one. I'll have to put that out. I'd have to have a comparable situation to look at. And don't think I didn't try to Google it.
The thing I'm gonna have to do is we're gonna have to separate those two floors back off because, we can't just sit there for 20 years with the top floor done, and it's not, I'm gonna have to find the top floor. But I'm gonna have to pull those other two off somehow and reissue them based on that finish.
Well, I was wondering about the permitting issue. I thought it was an assumption. I guess you set them at different lengths. I mean, 6 months. Permit time.
There's no limit to time as long as you don't stop working on it. And because of the downturn in the economy, the state went back and said, we're not gonna set a time limit on now. If it takes 5 years, some houses, it's been 10 years I've worked on it before they're complete. So, I mean, it's a long time, but as long as they work, they don't stop, then it's fine, and that's what they had. This house did sit for a long time, had no work done on it, but they, continued to come back and keep doing stuff.
Right.
And it's just cost them so much for their infrastructure, so they're just zeroed down to one floor right now. So, there you have to look at, I guess, the one floor, because I can see out a floor. I can't see out that floor, and that's what they're shooting to do. They don't occupy it, because I have not seen it. They'll have to get it complete before I can issue that, but I can grant a CO per floor.
How about the issue of power?
I gave them temporary power, and that's granted to allow acclimation to certain stuff as flooring. These days, you have to have it as long as you have electrical up to about 95% of code. They're allowed power to work, not to occupy. And they did receive that.
We have 30 days. Okay, we need to. Okay. All right, thank you. The next is Mr. Acorn. Acorn, I'm sorry.
The bill,
No, this is James. While we were out doing revaluation, we found this house that we didn't have any permit or CO on. And the reason is, we have had a lot of telephone, email problems in the past year, and this house did not get picked up. And so when we picked up this house, I done a discovery bill, and by law, I put a penalty on it for the taxpayer not listing any improvements to his property, and it was for 2012. And Mr. Acorn called me, and he had spoken with the building inspection office, and he was wondering if the board would release the penalties, because he didn't know that he was supposed to list the house with the tax office. And I said, I cannot release it because you did not list it with us, but I will ask the board.
Do that.
Pardon?
Where's it at?
It's at 112 Hubble Lane. It's over in Stecola.
You said you did not get permits for it?
Yes, he did get a permit, but he assumed that, he asked, if there was anything else he needed to do, and the building,
Okay, so he had no idea that,
he was notified.
that he was in the wrong.
Because that's the number one law in North Carolina, is the taxpayer's responsibility to list their property each year.
But he pulled the permit and thought it was when they picked up that.
Yes.
The CO got completed, we did have troubles with our emails that it was not transferring from the building inspections office into the tax office. So by law, with human error, or any kind of error that happens in the county, you can release the penalty. The board, Irma cannot by law release it. But that has happened. Mine's been changed 4 times since I've been here in 2008. So there's been lots of problems. So it did happen that the email was sent from the building inspections office. It just did not get received into the tax office. And if it had, the property would have been listed, correct?
Yes.
What's the penalty?
$59. How much did you say? $59.97, $60. Having to go on the side of, the issue of our wonderful IT, the situation was that I think it's probably turned out a lot different than we have noticed, because you would have seen it listed, right?
Well, we just, when they issue a certificate of occupancy, they email it up to us, and then we put it out to where to go get it.
Okay, so you weren't able to list it. I would have to excuse that.
I read the cover sheet on
Yes, I did.
that pretty much explains his honest mistake. Well, but really nobody's mistake. It's just floating around out there. Cyberspace.
I'm still going
Has
to.
that happened before?
Yes, we have in the past. Well, since we started the reevaluation, we have found a lot of houses and mobile homes and things that we did
My
not.
recommendation would be if you email it that back, you send a copy and carrier or whoever goes up there and get it and bring it to you,
Yeah.
not depend on
The email.
a perfect computer.
Okay.
And no, there's somewhere in this world where you don't have to have separate systems for everything in the county. And I don't know how far out in the world that is, if anybody down the road's even gonna worry about it. But if everybody had access to the same console, then you would understand what's supposed to be and what's not supposed to be.
Well, our email addresses have
Yeah,
changed.
I know it. I can't even find anybody. Really? I mean, Alicia Farm just sent me an email the other day, hers has changed. And, I've been sending them, where are they going? I get this thing called the mail thing, and I thought somebody messed with me. Seriously.
The one thing we do send email, and then we keep 2 copies for ourselves, 1 copy for the file, 1 copy for the home.
Okay,
So we do keep 2 hard copies every time we issue.
I'm sure you did.
Right,
Yeah,
so,
yeah, the hard
in the old times, so you'll know what we used to do is stack on the carrier right there. But, so now, with the new computer situation, where as soon as we see it, we can send it to her. So, and Irma knows that we just went through, 75 back at the end of last year, or year before last, where we sent them.
75.
Well, I'm talking about all kinds of different renovations additions that she did not have copies of.
Yeah.
The changeover to the GrahamCounty.org is to be completed before the end of this fiscal year.
No, we could have been sending them to Dollar or
That will be completed.
whatever we thought we were supposed to be sending.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
But the follow-up, we do always make copies.
Yeah.
Do you, I guess, the way that there's record of you getting that email and putting the CO in is actually doing the listing, right?
Yes.
That's the verification on it. All right.
Well, we go ahead and, as soon as we get that CO and we go out and get that property, it's on the property record card.
Okay.
So and all of our property record cards are online, therefore any taxpayer can get on and see exactly what their value will be January 1st of that year.
All right, great. Okay, do we want to take care of this one then?
I like this. I'm gonna say,
All right, we have a motion to release the $59.97 due to error. And I'm not saying it's your error, I'm not saying it's your error, we're just gonna put it on the mail demon, whatever that is. Okay, all right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion or comment? And I'm beginning to understand more clearly what you're saying about you not being allowed to release. All right, we have a motion, second, all approved, all opposed, like sign. Thank you very much. Okay, this time we'd like to entertain public comment, please. Are you the only one? Is it Mr. Joe Detto the only one? Okay. All right, who's first on the list there?
Joe.
Okay. All right.
My name is Joe Detto, and I'm a small business owner here in Graham County and Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to come before you. I've had great interaction with the county manager, Ms. Kemp,